It was a typical Thursday morning when I decided to surprise my son Marcus with his favorite homemade lasagna. I had spent 3 hours the night before preparing it from scratch, using the recipe his grandmother had passed down to me 43 years ago. The same recipe I'd made for every one of his birthdays, every celebration, every time he'd had a rough day and needed comfort food. I knocked on the door of his beautiful suburban home, the same house I'd helped him buy with an $80,000 down payment from my retirement savings. "Marcus, honey," I called out cheerfully, balancing the heavy glass dish in my arms. "I brought your favorite." When he opened the door, I immediately knew something was wrong. His face was twisted with an expression I'd never seen before, pure, undiluted rage. But I pushed forward, hoping my gesture of love might soften whatever was bothering him. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, stepping inside without invitation, as I had done countless times before. "I thought we could have lunch together. I know how stressful work has been lately." Marcus slammed the door behind me with such force that the windows rattled. "Mom," he said, his voice dripping with venom, "we need to talk." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I set the lasagna on his granite kitchen counter, the same counter I'd paid $12,000 to install when he'd remodeled 2 years ago, and turned to face my only child. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" He began pacing back and forth like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I just can't." "Do what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Marcus, you're scaring me." That's when he stopped pacing and looked me straight in the eye. What I saw there chilled me to my core. It wasn't just anger, it was pure hatred. "I wish you were never born," he screamed, his voice echoing through the house. "My life would be so much better if you had never existed." The world stopped spinning. I felt as though someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart with their bare hands. Those words, those impossible, devastating words, hung in the air between us like a death sentence. "What?" I whispered, gripping the counter for support. "Marcus, what did you just say?" "You heard me perfectly," he continued, his voice getting louder and more vicious with each word. "I am sick of you, Mom. Sick of your constant interference, your suffocating presence, your need to control every aspect of my life. My friends think you're pathetic. Sarah thinks you're creepy. Everyone can see what you are except you." My legs gave out. I sank into one of his dining room chairs from the $4,000 dining set I'd bought him as a housewarming gift. "But Marcus," I managed to say through my tears, "I'm your mother. I love you. I've given you everything." "That's exactly the problem," he exploded. "You've given me everything, but you've never given me space. You show up unannounced. You call me 3 times a day. You insert yourself into every decision Sarah and I make. I can't breathe with you constantly hovering over me." I tried to speak, to defend myself, to explain that everything I did came from love, but he wasn't finished destroying me. "Do you want to know what Sarah said yesterday?" he continued, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "She said she'd rather move across the country than deal with you anymore. She said you're the reason we haven't started a family yet, because she can't stand the thought of you being around our kids constantly." Each word was a knife to my heart. Sarah, the sweet girl I'd welcomed into our family 5 years ago. Sarah, who I'd thrown a $15,000 engagement party for. Sarah, who called me Mom and hugged me at every holiday. "I've sacrificed 43 years of my life for you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I've given you everything I had, and that's why you need to disappear," Marcus shot back. "I never asked for your sacrifices. I never asked you to give up your life for me. That was your choice, and now it's become my prison." I stood up on shaking legs, my heart shattered into a million pieces. The lasagna sat there on the counter, steam still rising from it, a symbol of all the love that had just been thrown back in my face. "I gave you life," I said, my voice barely audible. "And I wish you hadn't," he replied coldly. "I wish you had never been born so I could have lived my life without this guilt, without this burden, without you." I walked toward the door like a woman in a trance. 43 years of memories flashed before my eyes. Teaching him to ride a bike, staying up all night when he had pneumonia, working double shifts to pay for his college, walking him down the aisle at his wedding because his father had passed away years before. As I reached for the door handle, I turned back one last time, hoping against hope that I would see some flicker of the little boy who used to run into my arms every day after school. Instead, I saw a stranger. "I love you, Marcus," I whispered. "Well, I wish you didn't," he replied. "And I wish I didn't have to." I left that house and drove home in a daze, my son's words echoing in my mind like a broken record. Asterisk, I wish you were never born. I wish you were never born. I wish you were never born. Asterisk. When I got to my small apartment, I sat in my old recliner and began to cry, not just for what had happened, but for what I was finally beginning to understand. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text messages from the past month. "Mom, can you help with the car payment this month? Sarah's hours got cut. $650. The roof needs repairs. Could you loan us $3,000? We'll pay you back." They never did. "Sarah wants to redecorate the living room. Could you cover the furniture? It's only $8,000. Only. We are planning a vacation to Hawaii. Could you watch the house and maybe help with the airfare? $4,500. I walked to my desk and opened the drawer where I kept all my financial records. For the next 3 hours, I went through every check I'd written, every credit card statement, every bank transfer I'd made for Marcus over the past 10 years. The total was staggering. $247,000. Nearly $250,000 I'd given to a son who wished I'd never been born. When Marcus was 8 and wanted to play travel baseball, I worked weekends for 6 months to pay the $3,000 fee because I didn't want him to miss out. When he was 16 and crashed his first car, I took out a loan for $12,000 to buy him another one, because he needed transportation to get to his job. When he graduated college with $45,000 in student loans, I paid them off completely so he could start his adult life debt-free. When he wanted to propose to Sarah, I gave him my mother's $8,000 engagement ring and paid for the romantic trip to Paris, where he popped the question, another $6,000. The wedding cost me $35,000. I paid for everything because Marcus said they wanted to start their marriage without the stress of debt. The house down payment, $80,000 from my retirement fund. Home improvements over the years, $28,000. Car payments when money was tight, $15,000. Emergency loans that were never repaid, $23,000. Christmas and birthday gifts, $12,000. All of it for a son who screamed that he wished I'd never been born. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering every sacrifice, every dream I'd postponed, every opportunity I'd missed because I was always putting Marcus first. When other women my age were traveling, I was working extra shifts to pay for Marcus's expenses. When my friends were learning new hobbies, I was babysitting Marcus's problems. When I could have been saving for a comfortable retirement, I was funding my son's lifestyle. At 3:17 a.m., something inside me shifted. The grief began to transform into something else, something colder and more calculating. If Marcus wanted me to disappear from his life, I would grant his wish, but not in the way he expected. Friday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I put on my best suit and drove downtown to see my attorney, Patricia Coleman, a sharp woman in her 60s who'd handled my legal affairs since my husband passed away 15 years ago. "Eleanor," she greeted me warmly. "What brings you in today?" "I need to make some major changes to my estate planning," I said, sitting across from her desk. "I want to remove my son completely from my will." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "That's a significant decision. Has something happened?" I told her everything. Every cruel word, every moment of that devastating conversation, every realization I'd come to about how I'd been used and discarded. Patricia listened in stunned silence. She'd known Marcus since he was a teenager, had watched me sacrifice endlessly for him. "Eleanor," she said finally, "I'm so sorry. After everything you've done for that boy." She shook her head. "Yes, we can absolutely change your will. In fact, I think we should do much more than that." We spent 4 hours that day restructuring my entire financial life. My will, which had left everything to Marcus, now designated the Children's Hospital as my primary beneficiary, the same hospital where I'd volunteered for 20 years. My $150,000 life insurance policy, which had Marcus as the sole beneficiary, was changed to benefit 3 different charities. But Patricia had an even better idea. Eleanor, she said, did you know that you're listed as a co-signer on Marcus's mortgage? I nodded. Yes, his credit wasn't good enough to qualify a loan. That means you have legal rights to that property. Given his current financial situation and history of depending on your support, we could make a case that the loan is at risk. My pulse quickened. What are you saying? I'm saying that we could legally force the sale of that house to recover your investment, especially if we can demonstrate that Marcus has been financially irresponsible. The irony was delicious. The same house I'd helped him buy could be taken away because of the very financial dependence he'd just screamed at me about. Do it, I said without hesitation. Next, I drove to the bank where Marcus and I had a joint account for family emergencies, an account I'd opened with $25,000 and had been steadily refilling whenever they had unexpected expenses. I'd like to close the joint account, I told the teller. Will the other party be joining you? She asked. No, and he doesn't need to. Check the account terms. She did. And sure enough, I had the right to close it unilaterally since I was the primary account holder. The current balance is $18,500, she said. Would you like that transferred to your personal account? Yes, please. Talking out of that bank with my money back in my pocket felt like the first taste of freedom I'd had in decades. But I wasn't done. My next stop was the credit card company. Marcus was an authorized user on one of my cards, which he used for emergencies that somehow happened every month. I'd like to remove an authorized user and cancel their card, I told the customer service representative. Certainly. The card will be deactivated within the hour. Then I called the insurance company. Marcus was on my health insurance plan as a dependent, even though he was 38 years old and had a job. I need to remove my son from my policy, I said. Is he getting coverage elsewhere? That's his problem to figure out. By the end of the day, I had systematically removed Marcus from every aspect of my financial life. The son who wished I'd never been born was about to discover what life looked like without me. But the most satisfying call came last. I dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the first ring. Mom, he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Look, about yesterday. Marcus, I interrupted, my voice calm and steady. I've been thinking about what you said. I was angry. I didn't mean. Oh, but you did mean it, I said. And you know what? You're right. My life would have been better if I'd never had you. There was stunned silence on the other end. So I've decided to grant your wish, I continued. I am disappearing from your life, just like you wanted. Mom, what are you talking about? Check your credit card, Marcus. Check our joint bank account. Check your insurance. Check everything. I could hear him frantically clicking on his computer in the background. What did you do? He whispered. I gave you exactly what you asked for. A life without me in it. No more suffocating mother. No more financial support. No more safety net. You're free. You can't do this. Actually, I can. And I have. Oh, and Marcus, you might want to call a lawyer. Patricia Coleman will be in touch about the house. The house? What about the house? The house I co-signed for. The house that's at risk because of your financial irresponsibility. The house that might need to be sold to protect my investment. You're bluffing. Am I? You'll find out soon enough. I hung up the phone and turned it off. For the first time in years, I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted the woman in the mirror, a woman who had finally found her spine. The calls started the next morning. 17 missed calls from Marcus, 12 from Sarah, even 3 from Sarah's mother, who I'd met exactly twice. The text messages were even more frantic. Mom, please call me back. We need to talk. This is crazy. You can't just cut us off like this. Sarah is crying. She doesn't understand why you're doing this. Please, Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. But the most telling message came at 2 a.m. How are we supposed to pay for everything without your help? There it was. The truth. It wasn't about love or family or reconciliation. It was about money. I deleted every message without responding. A week later, Patricia called with an update. Eleanor, you're not going to believe this. Marcus hired a lawyer to fight the mortgage situation, but it backfired spectacularly. How so? In trying to prove he could handle the mortgage independently, he had to disclose all his finances. Turns out, he's been gambling online. He owes $35,000 to various creditors and hasn't made a house payment in 2 months. My heart sank, not because I felt sorry for him, but because it confirmed that all my money over the years had been wasted on someone who was recklessly irresponsible. What does this mean? It means the bank is now extremely interested in recovering their money. The foreclosure process has already begun, and my cosigner liability. Because of his financial mismanagement, you're protected. In fact, you might recover some of your original down payment when the house sells. 2 weeks later, I received a registered letter. It was from Marcus, written in his own handwriting, the same handwriting I'd helped him practice when he was 7 years old. Dear Mom, it began, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to reconsider. We are losing the house. Sarah left me yesterday because she can't handle the financial stress. I am moving in with my friend Jake, sleeping on his couch. What does this mean? It means the bank is now extremely interested in recovering their money. The foreclosure process has already begun, and my cosigner liability. Because of his financial mismanagement, you're protected. In fact, you might recover some of your original down payment when the house sells. 2 weeks later, I received a registered letter. It was from Marcus, written in his own handwriting, the same handwriting I'd helped him practice when he was 7 years old. Dear Mom, it began, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to reconsider. We are losing the house. Sarah left me yesterday because she can't handle the financial stress. I am moving in with my friend Jake, sleeping on his couch. The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing every way his life had fallen apart since I'd removed my support. But nowhere in those 3 pages did he acknowledge the cruelty of his words. Nowhere did he take responsibility for wishing I'd never been born. It was all about the consequences he was facing, not the pain he had caused. I wrote back a single sentence. You got exactly what you wished for. 3 months passed. I used my newfound financial freedom to do things I'd only dreamed of. I took a cruise to Alaska, something I'd wanted to do for 15 years, but never could afford because I was always bailing Marcus out of some crisis. I redecorated my apartment with beautiful furniture, instead of the second-hand pieces I'd been using because Marcus might need help with his expenses. I joined a book club, started taking art classes, and even began dating a wonderful man named Robert, who I'd met at the community center. For the first time in decades, I was living my life for me. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was from Jake, Marcus's friend. Mrs. Peterson, he said, his voice shaking. I think you need to know. Marcus is in the hospital. My heart stopped. Despite everything, he was still my son. What happened? He tried to hurt himself. He's been drinking heavily since Sarah left, and last night he took a bunch of pills. I found him this morning and called 911. I drove to the hospital in a haze, my mind racing between maternal instinct and the memory of his cruel words. When I walked into his room, Marcus looked smaller somehow. Fragile. The machines beeping around him reminded me of when he was 10 and had his appendix out. How scared I'd been, how I'd never left his side. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in months, I saw my little boy instead of the angry man who had destroyed my heart. Mom, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything that had happened between us. Sorry for what, Marcus? I asked quietly. For everything. For what I said. For how I treated you. For taking you for granted. For wishing. He broke down completely. For wishing you were never born. That was the cruelest thing I've ever said, and I've regretted it every single day since. He continued through his sobs. I lost everything, Mom. The house, Sarah, my self-respect. And I realized that I didn't just lose those things. I lost the most important person in my life. I lost you, and it was my own fault. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes, but I held them back. Marcus, I said slowly, do you know what the hardest part was? It wasn't losing the money. It wasn't even your anger. It was realizing that the son I'd sacrificed everything for saw me as nothing more than a burden to be discarded. That's not true, he said desperately. I was angry. I was stressed. I was taking it out on the person I knew would always forgive me. But I was wrong, Mom. So wrong. You were wrong, I agreed. But that doesn't undo the damage. He looked at me with such desperate hope. Can you forgive me? Can we try to fix this? You were wrong, I agreed. But that doesn't undo the damage. He looked at me with such desperate hope. Can you forgive me? Can we try to fix this? I sat down in the chair beside his bed, the same kind of chair I'd slept in when he was sick as a child. Marcus, I said carefully, I will always love you because you're my son. But I will never again sacrifice my well-being for yours. I will never again enable your poor choices. And I will never again allow you to treat me as less than I deserve. I understand, he said quickly. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, Gamblers Anonymous, anything. This isn't about what you'll do, I replied. This is about who you are. And the person who could wish his mother was never born isn't someone I can trust with my heart again. His face crumpled. So there's no hope, no way to fix this. I thought for a long moment. Marcus, I've spent 43 years being your mother. I've been your ATM, your safety net, your emotional support system, your problem solver. But I was never just Eleanor. I was never just a person with my own needs and dreams. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. If you want to rebuild a relationship with me, it has to be between two adults who respect each other, not between a mother and a son who sees her as a resource to be exploited. How do I do that? He asked desperately. You figure out how to live your life without expecting me to fund it or fix it. You get help for your gambling. You learn to appreciate what people do for you instead of demanding more. And maybe, someday, you prove that you value me as a person, not just as a bank account. I walked toward the door, then turned back. I hope you get better, Marcus. I really do. But my well-being is no longer dependent on yours. That was 6 months ago. Marcus did go to therapy and joined Gamblers Anonymous. He got a job at a local garage and moved into a small studio apartment that he pays for himself. He sends me a card every month, not asking for anything, just telling me about his life and his recovery. I haven't responded to any of them yet. Last week, I received a letter that made me smile. It was from the Children's Hospital, thanking me for including them in my will and letting me know how my future gift would help fund their new pediatric wing. The letter was addressed to Eleanor Peterson, generous benefactor. Not Marcus's mother, not the lady who always gives, just Eleanor. Yesterday, Robert asked me to marry him. I said yes. We are planning a small ceremony next spring, followed by a honeymoon in Italy, a trip I'm paying for with money I would have previously spent bailing out my son. Sometimes I wonder if Marcus and I will ever have a real relationship again. But I've realized something important. I hope we can, but I no longer need us to. The woman who walked into his house that day with homemade lasagna was desperate for his love and approval. She measured her worth by how much she could give and how needed she was. The woman I am today knows her worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion of her, not even her son's. Marcus wished I was never born, but in trying to erase me from his life, he actually gave me the greatest gift imaginable. He forced me to finally start living for myself. And for the first time in my 75 years, I'm truly, completely, wonderfully alive. The son who wished I was never born is no longer in my will, but the woman he helped me become is worth more than any inheritance I could leave behind. Did you enjoy my story of transformation? I'd love to hear which part resonated most with you in the comments below. If this story inspired you or reminded you of your own journey, please share it with someone who might need to hear it.